Hey guys, it's Libby and welcome to my wrap up for the months of March and April. March did not get its own wrap up because, as I suspected, I spent the entire month reading Moby Dick and I didn't even finish it. So we're just gonna roll it all into one. So in these 2 months, I read 2 novels, 1 short story, and 1 play. So starting off with Moby Dick by Herman Melville, I read this as the sort of opening salvo to my project of reading the literature of the American Renaissance. And honestly, I feel like given the amount of time I spent reading this book, I should have more thoughts on it. But it's just frankly very bland. Based on reviews that I read on Goodreads, I feel like I had a very similar experience to what other people have, which is that the first like 150 pages or so is fascinating and like way more interesting and also way more gay than I was expecting, and then that fades and the next 3/4 of the book is pretty bland. So we get introduced to our narrator Ishmael at the beginning. He's got a fairly fun personality and a real fondness for describing like every little element of what happens to him. So there's one scene where he's in Nantucket. He's trying to get a room at an inn and all of the beds are full. So he's like trying to figure out, like, can he sleep on this bench that's in the dining room? And we spend multiple pages trying to make this bench work. So it's like, okay, so the bench is too narrow to actually sleep on. And there's also like a knot in it. So the innkeeper goes and gets a carpenter's plane to level this knot. And like we kind of fix it, but not really. Okay, so there's another bench. Can we put the 2 benches together and sleep on that? No, the other bench is higher. It's not gonna work. How about like pushing the bench up against the wall, and then you can kind of do like a half of the body on the bench thing and the other half bracing against the wall. Unfortunately, the only spot on the wall is underneath a window and there's a really big draft. So there's all this stuff that should like objectively be boring, but Ishmael is just so charming. He makes it wonderful to read about. Then in the back half, or in the back 3/4, Ishmael gets on a ship. He works on a whaling vessel, and we meet the famous Captain Ahab, who has got to get that freaking white whale, Moby Dick, who bit his leg off. And in this part of the book, Ishmael really retreats. So he's still narrating, but he almost never talks about himself. We hear a lot about the other sailors on the vessel and the other ships that they encounter. We hear a lot about the mechanics of whaling and blubber harvesting. So in that sense, it did kind of remind me of like Thomas Hardy's Far from the Madding Crowd, where I sort of, this is not actually true, but I feel like I learned enough about shepherding from Far from the Madding Crowd that I could go shepherd. There are worse ways to learn about how to do whaling than reading Moby Dick. But ultimately, the deal is being on a whaling vessel was mostly boring, punctuated with brief periods of unpleasantness. And being a New England dilettante is like way more fun. Sorry for being a pleb, but I think I would have preferred it if like the whole whaling episode had been like 3 or 4 chapters within this larger narrative of Ishmael's life. So I ended up giving Moby Dick 3 stars. I do feel like this would be a very interesting book to study, because Melville's doing what seemed to me like quite innovative things, even in the more boring whaling sections. So like there's some scenes which are very dialogue heavy, and you have to sort of put together the action without getting any direct narration. So this is the rare 3-star read that I would be willing to read again. And if you guys have any recommendations on like lectures or books about Moby Dick, I would be interested to hear about that. Then I really switched it up. I went from a very long American work to a very short Russian work, even though I feel like the Russians are known for being long-winded, or at least Tolstoy is. I read the one-act play Mozart and Salieri by Alexander Pushkin. I read the Anthony Wood translation. So as you guys may know, my favorite film of all time is Amadeus, which is based on the Peter Shaffer play, also called Amadeus, the Shaffer play was based on this one-act Pushkin play, Mozart and Salieri. And we had a friend visiting us recently who had never seen Amadeus, so I was like, okay, I am making you watch this film. Quick note, it seems like the only version of Amadeus available online now is the director's cut, which I'm just gonna say, I think the director's cut is worse. Like, if you can, go for the 2-hour and 40-minute theatrical version. It's plenty long. Don't go for the 3-hour director's cut. So Amadeus tells the very historically inaccurate story of the composer Antonio Salieri's intense jealousy for Mozart's work, especially given that like Mozart was such a lewd and childish person. And so Salieri decides to try to take revenge on God for giving Mozart this great musical ability that he himself wanted by killing Mozart and stealing his music. Now, I'm giving you the plot précis of Amadeus because I'm not really sure you could get that from the Pushkin play, Mozart and Salieri. The play only has 3 characters, the 2 composers and a tavern keeper. And a lot of it is monologue from Salieri, and he's not like directly coming out and saying like, this is my plan. It's more just like, Mozart, what are we gonna do about you? So I would say like, don't just read this play by itself. If you are already a fan of either the film or the Shaffer play, then go read, like it's enjoyable to read the Pushkin original, but it's a kind of a mess where you don't know what's happening if you just read it by itself. Oh, and do have your preferred music purveyor handy, Spotify, YouTube, whatever, because I think you will want to listen to some of the pieces that are mentioned. So I gave Pushkin's Mozart and Salieri also 3 stars. And I followed that up with another very, very short thing, Moby Dick Wore Me Down. I read Serpentine by Philip Pullman, which is a short story in the His Dark Materials universe. So I'm just gonna come out and say at the beginning, I did not rate this. It's very short, and in the author's note that comes after it, he says that he sort of wrote this many years after the His Dark Materials trilogy, when he was either in the process of or planning the Book of Dust trilogy, and this short story is kind of meant to be the bridge into the Book of Dust trilogy, showing a change in the relationship between Lyra and her demon Pantalaimon. So I haven't read the Book of Dust trilogy yet, so I think it's possible that like once I have read that, I will be like, oh, this was an interesting short story and it, was necessary to show something, but I haven't gotten to it yet, so this was just sort of a short story with some characters that I mostly remembered that didn't particularly seem to be consequential, and it's also extremely short. So I just didn't rate it. I'll let you know after I've read Book of Dust if it is worth your time. But have no fear, I did read one thing that I really enjoyed and did not just leave me feeling meh. It is, where did I put it? Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. I've had this for quite a while and I keep being like, Libby, read it. But I think it recently got a Netflix adaptation, and so, I need to step on it. One, if I want to watch the adaptation, which I'm actually not sure that I will. And 2, because we're entering a new realm of where spoilers could happen, and you really don't want to get spoiled on this. So this is a thriller, which is not normally what I read, but I adored it. We have multiple narrators, not all of whom are telling us everything. I would say sort of our central character is a woman named Louise. This is set in like modern day London area. Louise works as a secretary at a psychiatric clinic. And she's divorced and she has a son. Things are getting a little rough because her ex-husband has like gotten remarried and is now having a new kid. She still has not really moved on, but she did kind of have a moment. They didn't have sex, but they did have a little smooch. She had kind of a moment with a guy at a bar, and then she goes into work the next day and it turns out this guy is her new boss. Awkward. And she also runs into this guy's wife separately. So she's got this kind of sexual tension with her boss, but also this like friendship with his wife, and she's trying to keep them separate. But it becomes increasingly clear that their marriage is not good. It may be in fact exceptionally bad. So I'm going along through most of the book thinking like, this is a fairly engaging thriller. It should be your classic 4 stars. I know that there's a twist, but like I kind of feel like I have at least a vague idea of what the twist is. Friends? No. I was completely blindsided. The last 3 chapters just like bam, 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 hit you. Make sure you are able to read them all in one go if you are reading this yourself. So I did give this 5 stars. That may just purely be because I'm so bowled over by the end. And normally I try not to reread a book in the same calendar year. I might make an exception for Behind Her Eyes because knowing the end, I so desperately want to like go through and look for any little clues that Sarah Pinborough has left us. So 5 stars to this, absolutely the highlight of the month, or actually the 2 months. Thank you all very much for watching. I will see you again soon.